What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another War Thunder video. With patch 1.59 just around the corner, I decided to take a quick look at my top 5 most anticipated new vehicles in patch 1.59. So what do you say we get right into it? We're going to start things off at number 5. This is the Henschel HS123A1. This is a single-seat biplane from the Spanish Civil War and very early World War II era. Now, some of you may be wondering why on earth would I like a biplane, but honestly, it harkens back to the early days of War Thunder. After all, no matter which nation you fly the most right now, we all started off with biplanes of some descript. And as far as flight models go, there's just something so simple about a biplane that has always been a source of fun for me. As far as plane models, I have to say the Henschel is just absolutely gorgeous. You can see how Gaijin has spent a lot of time meticulously reconstructing this thing in digital form. You can say whatever you want about War Thunder, but my god, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful game, and the plane models are just gorgeous. The Henschel 123 comes with two 7.92mm machine guns, as well as a couple of bomb options. Yes, this was in fact a dive bomber, a very early dive bomber. You can get 4 50-kilogram bombs, or with an upgrade, you can get a 250-kilogram bomb to go along with those 4 50s. So you get a nice little bomb load for a very early plane. This is a battle rating 1.3 on the dev server. This will be quite handy for RB tanks. Those of you who are going to try out the new reserve tank that Germany is getting will find this to be a very nice addition to go along with that in your lineup. And on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we find the Yak 30D. Go from biplanes to jets. This is a Tier 5 battle rating 8.0 jet for the Soviet Union. I did some initial testing. I wanted to find out how fast this thing could go, of course. I wanted to see how its energy retention was, how maneuverable it was. And from a maneuverability standpoint, it was impressive. You know, it's not quite as maneuverable as the Yak 15s and the Yak 17 that are in the game. But this plane is designed differently. This looks more like a MiG-15 or a MiG-17 that we all are more accustomed to seeing. The Yak 30 is armed with 3 23mm cannons, which you can see on the underside of the fuselage. Unlike the MiG-15 or the MiG-17, there are no 37mm cannons, so just the 23s, which are quite useful. And I suspect a lot of people are going to end up liking this configuration as far as the armament goes, because you don't have two very different muzzle velocities. The 37 and the 23 fire at very different speeds, thereby making it a little bit of a challenge for newer pilots to get accustomed to the MiG-15 or the MiG-17. But with 323s, I think the Yak 30 is going to be quite popular with a lot of pilots. The Yak does have air brakes. They're on the rear end of the fuselage, just like the MiG-15, MiG-17. Very nice looking. Beautiful plane model. But now let's put her into a dive and see how fast she can go. See that dive rate's pretty damn good. Just under 1,100 kilometers an hour IAS. Very fast. The red line's at about 1030 IAS. So that's awfully impressive for a new jet. When you consider the speeds in which you can go in the pre-existing Yak jets that are in the game, the Yak 15s and the Yak 17, it doesn't even compare. It's a completely different plane. It's capable of far greater speeds. But just how fast? Just a little bit later in that clip, I decided to push it a little bit further. So I did a zoom climb at 40-degree angle, and it had no problem retaining energy. It's remarkably good. And here we're going to redline, and we're going to actually snap the wings. Push it really hard. Over 1,100 initially, but sustained speeds over 1081 will snap the wing right off. But still, that's awfully impressive. At number 3 on the list, we have the IT1. That's right, we have a rocket tank. But unlike other rocket tanks that we've covered on the channel, this is a guided system. ATGM stands for Anti-Tank Guided Missile. This fires 15 Dracone missiles. They're 50 kilograms in size and have a maximum penetration value of 500 millimeters. So they'll be able to pen just about anything on the battlefield. And of course they have this very cool looking animation for every time they reload. I love this thing. Even though the early model on the dev server wasn't the smoothest model, I think it looks pretty damn cool nonetheless. Unlike something like the Sheridan, which is an American tank which fires ATGMs or anti-tank guided missiles, the IT1 comes with the rockets unlocked right away. With the Sheridan, you have to unlock the rockets. The Sheridan is a very different tank. It's a far lighter vehicle, but the cannon specifically, it actually has a cannon. This is a missile launching system instead of the traditional turret. This has the T-62 hull, which is a main battle tank for the Russians, whereas the Sheridan used a lightweight aluminum frame, which was great for Vietnam, but it's not going to be so great for War Thunder, I'm afraid. You can see the heavy T-62 hull is making for a rather slow turret traverse on the IT1. But getting back to the Sheridan for just a second, the Sheridan initially has heat rounds which you can fire. They're over 300 millimeters of penetration, so they're pretty good. But if you want the rocket system, you have to unlock them. You fire the rockets out of the same cannon as the heat rounds on the Sheridan. So if you want to switch from the heat rounds to the rockets, all you have to do is just hit a button on your keyboard, and it's just like switching from APCBC and say APCR on some of your other tanks. It's just a matter of switching out the ammo. The question I have about the whole ATGM is how much output, or how much damage is it going to take? Because in early testing on the dev server, you had to be absolutely precise with some of these systems. You know, if you hit the ammo, it detonated the ammo. But as you saw against that Panther, if you didn't hit ammo, it wasn't a very large blast radius, so it didn't do a whole lot of damage. It has no problem against this mouse, I tell you that. No problem whatsoever, right through the turret cheek, and detonated the ammo in the back of the turret, just absolutely beautifully. And so when I factor in things like the relatively good armor of the T-62's hull for the IT1, I factor in the high penetration value on the rockets, as well as the number of rockets, that being 15, I think the IT1 is going to end up proving to itself quite useful on the battlefield. It's going to be one of the best ATGMs that are going to be introduced in 1.59. But of course, only time will tell. Yeah! Next up, at number 2, we have the KV-2 754, a premium German, that's right, German heavy tank. This is a captured vehicle. The Germans captured a lot of Soviet KV-2s back on the war, and put them to quite a bit of use. This is based on the 1940 version of the KV-2, so it does have a machine gun on the turret. And speaking of the turret, you may notice something else that's unusual for a KV-2. There's actually a cupola on the top of the turret. This is not standard operating procedure for the Soviets. This is actually something that the Germans added. They took the commander's cupola from the Panzer IV and mounted it on top there to give the commander better visibility. Although I have to admit, sometimes I think about how much more visible can they actually add, because the KV-2 is already a very tall tank. It's a very large profile, which makes it quite vulnerable to a lot of tanks. The second feature some of you may have noticed on the KV-2 is on the very back of the tank. It looks like a little basket. And that was actually an external ammo rack, believe it or not. But for my money, and this is going to be just under 3,000 Golden Eagles, but for my money, that little basket in the back, that's going to be where I store all the bottles full of tears from Soviet KV-2 tankers who themselves are finally going to get KV-2'd. And lastly, we have at number 1, the N1K1JA. And much to my surprise, it's not a premium. There are no premium Japanese planes in the 1.59 patch, or at least not yet. I don't know what it is, but Gaijin always likes to sneak in the new Japanese premium, because that's the only way that's the only way Japan seems to be able to get a new fighter anymore, is to make it premium. This is a Tier 4 battle rating 5.0 plane, and you notice we actually have some guns on the underside of the wings in gun pods. We have a total of 4 20mm cannons, and despite the ammo count in the upper left-hand corner, do not actually get 4,000 rounds. This is footage from the first version of the dev server for 1.59. It should be closer to 400 rounds. That's what they had on the second version of the dev server, and I suspect that's what it'll have when this patch goes live. You also have 2 7.7mm machine guns on the engine cowling. It's a beautiful plane. The plane model, again, just like the brand new planes, it's just remarkably detailed. Now, as far as the flight model on this plane, it's a bit of an iffy question, because on the dev server, the moderators for Gaijin claimed that they had a placeholder flight model, and it felt exactly like the N1K2 from my initial dev server test flight. It felt exactly the same, and it wouldn't surprise me if they borrowed that flight model for just the testing purposes. So how this plane was going to fly on the live server, I can't say for sure, obviously, just yet. However, if I were a betting man, I would say that it's not going to fly completely differently. Based on some figures from Sub Ryan, who does flight model testing on the forums and does some just excellent data sheets, I suspect this is going to be very similar to the N1K2, at least how it currently flies. The N1K2, contrary to popular belief, does not fly as well as it should historically. It was actually a better plane than it is in game, but we'll get into that whole debate some other time. Those of you who think the N1K2 is a UFO, you can keep believing that if you want, but it's actually not. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. According to Sub Ryan, the N1K1, at least the current flight model, again, we'll see if it's final or not, but it has a 17-second turn time, and it can climb up to 6 kilometers in 5 minutes and 12 seconds. The thing about the N1K1, the N1K, just in general, that makes it so powerful, is that it has an interesting balance between power and agility. It has a far greater dive speed than, say, the LF Mark 9 Spitfire, but it has nowhere near as good of a climb rate. The LF Mark 9, for example, is a far better climber, has a similar turn rate, but it can't dive, and of course it doesn't have nearly the ammunition that the N1K does. So that's why it has the battle rating that it does. But if that plane had a comparable battle rating, I think the N1Ks would be clubbed, at least to some degree. You still get those planes, or those players who fly the Spitfires and have no clue what they're doing. They're too aggressive in their turns and they rip their wings. That's another flaw with the Mark 9. Is the very thin wings. They tend to break their wings quite easily if you're too aggressive in the turning. Whereas the N1K, it's been a long time since I've ripped a wing because of either excessive speeds or pulling too many G's on the wings. In my opinion, the N1K is just a far easier plane to fly. It's less prone to breaking, and that's one of the things that makes it so damn good. And so I'm really interested in seeing how this N1K1 will fare against other planes at 5.0. Using this against P-51 Mustangs, it's really going to be an interesting fight to see how the N1K will fare. The P-51 Mustang is a very good plane. Just unfortunately, too many people just do not take the time to fly it properly. With the introduction of the lower tier N1K, I'm expecting to see fewer J2M Raidens as well as A6M5s. I think this is going to completely change the makeup of Japanese teams. I think this is going to be spammed quite heavily, similar to the Ki 84 Ko, as the Ki 84 Ko has a very interesting balance between power and maneuverability. I think that's something that's going to be very similar to what you'll see with the N1K1. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today. That's my top 5 most anticipated vehicles in patch 1.59. If you were to make a list of your own, what would you include? Would you include this ridiculous TU4, this rip-off of the B-29? Would you include some more of the ATGMs, the anti-tank guided missiles? Let me know what your list would include in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up button. And of course, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Take care, guys.